So we wanted to give some information today about reframing behavior. I know that challenging behavior in the classroom and at home and in all the places that small children exist tends to be a common topic of discussion. So using the pyramid model as a lens for reframing behavior can help all of the adults involved have a better day as they're looking to find solutions and strategies to help children have a better day. We can go to the next slide. We want to acknowledge the Office of Early Childhood for the funding that is provided to support the pyramid model efforts throughout the state of Connecticut. They have invested in the pyramid model as a framework for supporting social emotional development of young children. So as Kate said, this is a two-part series that we'll be doing this month is the paradigm shift of reframing behavior and how we can understand behavior better through understanding children's development, thinking of behavior as communication, how culture and trauma may impact children's behavior, and then really focusing on shifting from reaction to prevention and focusing on our own regulation as the adults in the room. And then part two will be in October, and that will be more diving into the concrete strategies for reframing behavior and preventing challenging behavior. And we'll go into some more detail on some of the prevention strategies in the relationships and environments tier of the pyramid model. And talk a little bit about how to collect meaningful data when there is a need for more individualized interventions for children. So we would like to start by getting to know who's here a little bit. If you could sign in the chat with your name, the age of the children that you work with, and a brief little description of how you keep yourself calm when children's behavior challenges you. And I will start. Deep breathing is my best friend, and I try very hard to not only remember to just take a minute and pause and take a deep breath, but also make sure that the children who are around me that may be challenging me in that moment see me do that, hear me do that, model that behavior for them as well. You know, we have a director and mom to a toddler. That is a very important job as well and challenging almost every day. Deep breaths and speaking softer. I like that speaking softer piece. It's an easy strategy to keep yourself more calm by just speaking softer. Another deep breaths and taking music breaks. I like the music breaks. Music does a lot of positive things for our brains. Taking a deep breath before stepping into the situation. So being a little bit preventive as you walk into challenging situations. Keep a language simple. That is super important, especially in a challenging moment. Our brains are not wired to work very well when we're being challenged. So being mindful of the language you're using is super important. And then another deep breaths and counting. Counting is a good way to remember to take those deep breaths. Absolutely. Movement when possible. Sleep and proper nutrition. I think we often forget about those. We think about what to do in the moment, but all of the things we do surrounding those moments are just as important. So eat well and get enough sleep. And in difficult times, reminding yourself that your only job in that moment is to stay regulated. Well, thank you all for participating in that, and we will move on, but it's lovely to see so many people here thinking in terms of how to keep themselves regulated. If you haven't joined us yet, this is just a little introduction to our team. We are the Parent, Infant, Early Childhood team at Innovations Institute within the UConn School of Social Work. And you will see myself, Liz Chambers, Rachel Benata, and Kate Sweeney are all here. And then we are also supported by a wonderful team of researchers who help us out on the daily basis. We can go to the next slide. So just a brief overview of the pyramid model. If you are not familiar or haven't had enough coffee today and would like a little reminder of what it is. The pyramid model is inspired by the public health model of promotion, prevention, and intervention. And you can see that the pyramid, the yellow piece on the bottom of the pyramid, is the foundation for the pyramid, and that is the effective workforce. So not only the people involved in supporting children, but also the systems and policies that support those people. So all of you here are part of that effective workforce. And then the blue tier is tier 1. That is the universal promotion piece of the pyramid, which includes high quality supportive environments and nurturing and responsive relationships. And those are the things that all children need to be successful. And then the green piece is the second tier of the pyramid, or secondary prevention. And some children need a little bit more support in targeted social emotional skills and how we teach those skills so that they can not only prevent challenging behaviors, but also support the development of skills so that they have other ways of getting their needs met. And then the top of the pyramid is the intensive interventions, and some children will need some more specific assessment-based interventions that will help them have a supportive behavior plan in place. But the idea of the pyramid is that if you start at the bottom, very, very few children will need those more intensive interventions. Next slide. So each of these lunch and learns, we are going to start with some of the principles that we're hoping to guide all of our discussions. And the first one is that the pyramid model rests on a foundation of inclusivity, cultural responsivity, and anti-racist and anti-bias practices. We work every day to ensure that all children, all families, all staff members have what they need to be successful in their environments. Social emotional development is foundational for other developmental domains. So we cannot expect children to learn how to read, write, cut with scissors, do all the things, ride a bike, if they are unable to interact with the people and their environments in a successful way. So that they need to develop emotional skills for that. Children need to be taught social emotional skills, just like they need to be taught everything else. They don't learn how to be without seeing how to be, without having their skills built upon as they grow. And social emotional skills are just like reading skills. There are things that need to be taught explicitly and practiced on a regular basis. Behavior is communication. Behavior is communicating something at all times. Children don't misbehave just to give us a bad day. They're usually trying to tell us something. And then pyramid model practices are focused on adult behavior. So when the adult's behavior changes, the children's behavior changes. We have to support the children in their behavior change by doing something different as the adults in the room. And I think our next slide is about the paradigm shift that we are hoping that everyone can get from learning more about the pyramid model, and that the paradigm shift is taking us from the traditional approach of focusing on cognitive and motor skills with children to focusing on social emotional skills because they are foundational for all of those other skills. Changing from expecting children to learn skills naturally to intentional proactive teaching strategies of these social emotional skills, and then shifting from reacting to challenging behavior in the moment to being intentional and creating proactive solutions to not only prevent but also address what the child is communicating with that behavior. So the first piece that we wanted to dive a little bit deeper into is thinking about behavior within the context of child development. So viewing children's skills and behavior through a developmental lens, and asking yourself when a child is displaying some sort of behavior that's challenging to you, what is actually appropriate for this age, for this, whatever age the child is, what is appropriate for that age group. And then what also is appropriate for this specific child and their strengths and needs. So not every child develops at the same rate. But once you understand what is typical for an age range, you will then be able to understand what skills need to be developed to get that child to have those skills. And then also thinking about when was the last time this child had a screening. How do we know where they are developmentally, and how can we gain more information about where they are, what their specific strengths are, what their specific needs are, and then what skills must this child be taught in order to communicate their needs in a developmentally appropriate way. So once we understand where they are developmentally, what are the things that need to be built within that child so that they are able to develop those skills? How can we practice with them to build upon what they are able to do now to get them to what we are expecting of them? We can go to the next slide. So then we're gonna switch to a brief word cloud. Just want people to think about a child. I think we've all probably experienced a 2-year-old who bites another child during playtime. And just thinking about some factors that might contribute to a 2-year-old who bites during playtime, whether it is, environmental or situational or a lack of skill or any of those things. Just see what we can come up with there.
So I put the link to the Mentimeter in the chat. You can click on that if you would like to, or you can scan that QR code if you prefer to scan that code.
Give everyone a couple minutes to get in there and get some ideas going.
Liz, should I click on it to show on the screen as well? All right, on the link from the chat.
So the link for that is in the notes of the slide, should be. But I can also share if that's easier.
No, it's fine. You can't see the notes when you're in presenter mode. So just give me 1 second, crew. It's just a prompt to enter. I don't know if you get to log into yours, Liz, to show it.
Yeah, I'm going to the screen. Can you see that? So frustration seems to be have been entered a few times. I think the more people that
Ya
enter the
entré
same
varias
word,
veces,
the
entre
bigger
más
it gets.
gente entre, se vuelve más grande.
Oh, maybe it's because I started sharing. Okay, so I'll just go quickly over some of these and then give you back controls. So hunger, teeth coming in. I'm glad that somebody recognized that as a factor, a potential factor. Past trauma, self-defense. They could have needed to use that behavior in the past. Unable to regulate their emotions. They don't know how, they don't have another way of showing the emotion, whatever the emotion that they're having is, whether it's frustration or they're tired or scared. Any of those things can show up in as a behavior that we find challenging. Nonverbal, they might not have the words to say what they need. Sensory seeking, I love that that is there. Sensory input. Um, a, a lot of times children are seeking sensory input, and that is your mouth is a quick way to get that. So that's why we see, chewing on things. That is a definitely a factor that could contribute to this. So this is just, a little exercise in thinking about why, what are some of the factors that could contribute to a behavior that we find challenging. There are a lot of different reasons why a child may do something, and there are different reasons why another child might do the same behavior. So I'll give back the controls, and maybe that'll switch the sound back. Thank you for participating in that. Okay, and these are just a couple of resources, and Rachel has put them in the chat as well, so you have access to them. The one on the left is the CDC's Developmental Milestones booklet. So it has some pages for of many different age ranges from birth to, I think, 5. But it shows some typically developing things that children should be able to do at each of these age ranges. Some typical milestones that you could expect from a child that age. And I find this most helpful when you notice that a child is not meeting a milestone. You can look back at what came before that and see what skills need to be developed before they're able to meet that milestone. And then the one on the right is a pyramid model resource from NCPMI, and it is the developmental continuum of social emotional indicators. So it just focuses on some of the social emotional skills that children should reach at certain milestones. Sorry, we can go to the next slide. The next piece to consider when thinking about reframing behavior is children's temperaments. Not only children's temperaments, but adult temperaments as well. We all have our own unique way of interacting and engaging with the world. And we call that our temperament. There are different pieces to that you can see on this continuum, whether it's activity level, distractibility, sensory threshold, adaptability. and understanding children's temperament as well as your own can help you understand how your interactions with each other might go. It tells us a lot about the fit of the environment for children. It tells us a lot about their strengths, where they're really strong, and how you can best support their individual needs to be successful based on what success means for them and their individual temperament. And then this is a short, I think we need to skip part of it, short video that just kind of gives a little bit of what temperament is. I think
Did you ever
we wanted
wonder?
to skip to like 45 seconds, Kate, sorry. Thank you.
Temperament shapes the way we experience the world and interact with others. It is the collection of characteristics that makes each of us unique. Temperament is biologically based, the result of our own unique wiring in the brain and nervous system. So your child did not choose his temperament, and it's not the result of something you did or didn't do. Temperament is the reason why some of us love a crowd and others prefer a cup of coffee in a quiet place with a friend. Thinking about your child's temperament can help you tune into the meaning of his behavior and why he acts the way he does. Take, for example, your child's emotional intensity. Is he a big reactor who may squeal with delight when happy, but then have a knockdown, drag-out tantrum in reaction to a seemingly small problem? Or is he a more easygoing, go-with-the-flow kind of guy? What about your child's sensory reactivity, how she responds to sensory experiences? Does she thrive on lots of stimulation, lights, sounds, action? Or does she get overwhelmed easily by these kinds of sensations? Activity level is another important trait to tune into. Does your child always want to be moving and on the go? Or does he prefer quiet, less active play? Then there is adaptability. Does your child easily adapt to new experiences, such as new friends or new places? Or is he slower to warm up, needing time and support to feel comfortable? Finally, we have persistence. Does your child show patience to work through a challenging task, like rethinking her plan to make the boxes fit together? Or is he more likely to get frustrated and give up easily? Temperament may explain why two children can react quite differently even in the same situation. They feel and experience things differently due to their temperaments. What is important to remember is that every child is doing his or her best. They aren't trying to be challenging. Children who are easily overwhelmed by the world really do feel overwhelmed. And when they feel overwhelmed inside, they act overwhelmed on the outside. During these times, your child needs you more than ever. So why is tuning into your child's temperament so important? Because understanding the meaning of your child's behavior helps you respond in ways that are sensitive and that foster her healthy development. So being flexible is important. This means that you keep your child's temperament in mind when you make parenting decisions. For example, if your child is very active, you might take her outside to run around before having to go to the doctor's office where she will have to wait. Last but not least, remember, the goal is not to change your child, but to help her adapt and help her thrive. Letting your child know that you accept him for who he is helps him develop good self-esteem. How you parent really matters. Whatever your child's temperament, whether your child is easygoing or more intense and challenging, your thoughtful responses help your child build new skills and experience more joy in the world. And that's what being a mom or dad is all about.
So that was just it was focused for parents, but as we are all caregivers of young children, it is very relatable to our jobs as well. And just really is important to think about how children show up in our spaces and how we can get to know more about them and their temperament as we're planning our activities in our classrooms environments, and be intentional about supporting them in ways that meet their individual needs. And I think I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, who's going to take us through the next section.
Thanks, Liz. In this next section, we are going to talk just a little bit more about this idea of behavior as communication and really the importance of trying to understand what children are communicating through their behavior. And so, kids tell us things in a lot of different ways without maybe telling us anything, right? Sometimes they use words, but they also might point to something. You can also watch, as their eyes move to something else that draws their attention. They might pull on an adult. Certainly children communicate things by crying or biting or having, tantrums, really kind of clinging to an adult. So there are a lot of different ways that children, try to let us know that they need something or want something or something, they're not happy with something. They use a lot of different ways to give us those clues. And through all of the different ways that they communicate, they can be telling us a lot of different things. So Kate, if you want to go to the next slide, right? They might be sort of saying like, I want you to pay attention to me. And sometimes when people talk about, when they use the phrase like, oh, the child's just doing this for attention, it really has a negative connotation. So I want to just for a second pause on that to say, if we can reframe that to the child's looking for connection, right? They're needing some connection from someone who they trust. And so if you can think about it that way, as opposed to, oh, they're just attention seeking, I think it also helps, again, to respond in a way that meets the need. Or maybe they're trying to say, I want to play, right? I was thinking about, the example we were talking about earlier. Maybe the child just doesn't yet know how to initiate play. And the only way that they know how to initiate play is, maybe walking over and knocking over a lock tower. They don't know another way to initiate. They might be trying to say, I don't want to clean up. I'm not ready to do that. You're asking me to do a non-preferred activity, and I don't want to do that. Or I do want something. I want to play with the toy. I want a certain snack, or I'm hungry, or I want, to paint, and we're not doing that. Or I'm really engaged in what I'm doing and I don't want to stop what I'm doing. I think sometimes it can be easy for us as adults to forget that when children are really engaged in play and really kind of like in that flow state, it's really hard to stop, and if we can sometimes put ourselves in that situation, if you think about the last time you were doing something you really loved, if you were reading a book or on a walk or watching a movie that you really enjoyed, or, whatever you were doing and you're really engaged, and someone comes up to you and says, you have to stop that right now. Like that doesn't feel good. We don't like that. And children don't like that either. They might also be saying, I don't really want to have to interact with other people, or I need some space. So there are lots of things that children can be trying to communicate with us. And I think if there's one thing that we hope that you take away from some of these conversations, it's that they're not communicating, I'm here to annoy you, or I'm just trying to push your buttons, right? They're trying to tell us something else. And our job as the adult in the room is to try to understand what they're telling us. So we can go to the next slide. And so here's where I think too, we can get a little bit tripped up, where the behavior itself doesn't really tell us how we need to respond, really understanding the meaning of it or what it's trying to communicate, that lets us know how we should respond. So a really sort of simple example of this is, you know, if you have a child who's exhibiting some biting, it's not as though there's like one perfect anti-biting protocol that we all just need to make sure that we know and then can go implement, and then the child stops biting. It doesn't work like that, because the biting could indicate something different for different children. And so again, our job as adults is to really try to understand what the child is communicating to us. And oftentimes, if we can at least frame it as, like, are they trying to get something or are they trying to avoid something? That can at least give us a good place to start as we're trying to understand the behavior. So if they want something, you know, is it they want the bus that the other child's playing with, or some material that, you know, is up on a shelf that they really want and isn't available right now? Or are they wanting to do a certain activity? Are they wanting some help? Do they need an adult to help them to do something? Or do they want a friend to play with them? Do they need a hug, or again, some other form of connection? And that's what they're trying to communicate. You know, I need some connection. Or I just want to, again, keep doing what I'm doing. I'm really having fun at this center. And when you tell me that it's time for me to get out of this center, I don't like that. I really want to keep doing that. So there are other sort of wants or needs that they might have. But those are, you know, some examples. Or on the other side, I want to avoid something. You know, I don't want to be in this group. So when you tell me to come to circle time and I'm standing, you know, sort of close with a group of children, like, I don't like that. I don't want to do that. Or I want to avoid doing a certain activity. There's something, you know, that's part of our daily schedule that I don't really like, or I don't really find interesting. And so when you tell me it's time to do that, I don't really want to do that. I don't want to stop what I'm doing. I don't want to hear loud noises. You know, Liz was talking about sensory input earlier. Certainly, I think it can be easy to forget that classrooms with young children are naturally, oftentimes, there's some volume, right? And that can even be, you know, there are times when it can be even louder. And for some children are going to be a lot more sensitive to the volume or to other loud noises like a fire drill or something like that than other children. So again, if we can sort of broadly start with, does it seem like they're trying to get something, or does it seem like they're trying to avoid or get out of something? That can be a good place to start as you start trying to understand the behavior. So again, if you leave with anything else, right, all behavior has a function. And by the way, this is often true in adults, right? A lot of if we're sort of behaving in ways that we maybe wish that we wouldn't in reflection, a lot of our own behavior, right, also has a function. So this is true of young people, and it's true of adults as well. But so our goal, again, is to really try to get clear on what that function is. And then that's going to let us know in our next webinar, we're going to talk a little bit more about strategies and interventions. As we understand the function better, we'll be able to identify strategies or interventions that are more likely to support and meet the needs of the child who's exhibiting that behavior. Okay, so I think let's go to, this whiteboard activity. So let's think about this. On an almost daily basis, one child sits and watches other children play and then does something to destroy what they're doing, right? They knock over the blocks, they come over and start drawing in the picture the other child is drawing, or they pick it up and they rip it up. Let's start with, thinking about like, why might this be happening for this child? And holding that in mind, as you think about why this might be happening, what might be a thought on sort of like how you could prevent that? So if you give us just a second, I think Kate will be able to pull up a whiteboard for us and you'll be able to type directly on it.
That's showing for you all.
It is, it's loading. Okay.
Okay, wonderful. And what I can do is to align down the middle. And Rachel, the prompt here was why, right?
Yes, sort of like why might this be the case? Why might this be happening?
Yeah, I was trying to type that and I'm not sure what happened. 1 second. Close this out.
Here's the prompt
Oh,
in the
thanks,
chat.
Liz put it in the chat, yeah. And then on the other side, what might you do to prevent it?
Great.
And so folks, you can, if you hover over the little thing that looks like a pen, or actually probably it's easier to do.
Yeah, the
with
T
the-
takes you
yeah.
directly to text and you can just
Yep.
type.
Yep.
And then you can also pick up a sticky note, which is the square with a little bit of a flap open on the sort of bottom here. And that will populate a sticky note that you can type in as well. And some person, I guess, use that as well. So, right. If folks are having a hard time with this or on a device where you can't engage in this way, if folks want to put something in the chat, we can migrate it over as well.
This is great. I'm going to start reading a couple just in the interest of keeping us moving, but please keep adding. So I see a couple on in terms of the why, sort of some similar thoughts, right? Which is like the child wants to play and they don't really know how to do that, or they need some skills to support their ability to interplay. I see someone wrote new, and I'm maybe interpreting that as like the child is maybe new to the classroom. And it similarly maybe kind of like doesn't know how to engage or doesn't feel comfortable kind of like initiating a play scenario. I also see two that kind of feel similar in terms of experiment with cause and effect and seeking reaction or attention seeking, right? So they're just kind of like checking things out. Maybe what happens when I do this? What's the response? What goes down when I engage this way? And then in terms of things that could be done to prevent it, try providing the child who's destroying the play alternative items and directly engage with that child. Read social stories. Teacher goes and sits with the child before behavior starts and coaches them. I love that, right? So the teacher's right there and helping them. Oh, I see. Maybe it looks like you want to play. How could you ask them to play? Or giving them some language to help them interplay. Yeah, absolutely. Scaffold, maybe through pictures or video modeling, how to build friends. Absolutely. Right. It reminds me of some of that coaching, kind of like really thinking about how can I support this child in learning these skills. Encourage them to try with their own toys, create a play scenario with that child and another child. Yeah, absolutely. So I just want to highlight, these are all great examples, and just want to highlight that those really supportive and helpful responses to the behavior only happen if the way that the behavior is thought of is something like this child needs some more skills or they want to play. Those aren't the responses if how the behavior is sort of understood as like they're a bad kid or they're being mean. They're just really mean to these other kids. If that's how we think about the behavior, it's very unlikely that we will have these really supportive responses that you've identified on the right side. So I love that. Thank you all so much for engaging with that.
I'm going to take this down now. Continue. Okay, go back to screens.
Thanks, Kate. And Liz just put this handout in the chat. But this is something that can just help you sort of think about, you know, as you're trying to understand what's happening, like, you know, get a better handle on what might be happening with this behavior. It gives you some thoughts on different ways of intervening. And so the way that we talk about this is like, be a behavior detective, you know, be curious. Sometimes I say like, really put on your curious hat and see how that sort of changes how you think about things. So that's something that you can pull up. And again, we have that in English and in Spanish, and Liz has put those in the chat. I'm going to keep going. I recognize that we only have about 10 more minutes. So I'm going to talk about these next couple kind of quickly, and then Kate, I'll turn it over to you. So just really want to highlight the importance of understanding behavior with it in the context of a
Is she glitchy for you?
Yeah, hey, Rachel.
they're thinking about
It seems like your
behavior with
audio and internet was great, and then it got really glitchy. I'm wondering if you turn your camera off, if that helps.
No.
Okay. Yeah, Rachel, we're still not hearing you. Liz, do you want to just jump in on this one?
What I think Rachel was saying is the importance of thinking about family culture as you're thinking about children's behavior, and building relationships with all the families and the children.
Are you able to hear me? Sorry, I turned off.
It's still really glitchy.
Yeah. So that you have a better understanding of children's and families' culture, so that you can be culturally responsive in your practices and your responses to their behavior and your understanding of their behavior. Thinking about making sure that all families are represented in your environment, so that families feel comfortable coming into your spaces and having conversations with you about their practices at home. Ensuring that children receive prompts in their home language is sometimes often overlooked because we're giving whole group prompts. And if a child's home language is something other than the language that is spoken most in the classroom, we have to really be intentional about making sure that we're talking to children in language that they understand. So not just, somebody said earlier, you know, using simple language, but also using their home language so that they are able to understand what you're asking of them. And then having an awareness of how your own upbringing affects how you view what is an appropriate behavior. Sometimes we have differing views of what behavior challenges us based on how we were raised, the context of our family culture, and just having an awareness of that as you interact with children and families. Implicit bias, we always like to ensure that we talk about this as it is a very important piece of how we engage with the world. Implicit bias is defined as an unconscious belief and stereotype that impacts your interactions, behaviors, and feelings towards others in an unconscious way. So you often can have, and you're not even aware of the things that you think about a certain situation or an interaction. And it really impacts the way that we view behaviors, the way that we approach discipline, the way that we engage with families, and how we engage with other adults in general. And we all have implicit bias. Being aware of that is our goal. And then thinking about the impact trauma may have on the children, not only on the children in your care, but also their families, and on yourself as a human being who may be impacted by trauma. Behaviors that children have who may have experienced trauma can include challenges with self-regulation, paying attention or staying focused, following directions, controlling impulses. The way that trauma impacts the brain impacts the way that children behave. Also impacts the way that we react as adults in the situation. And I think the next slide is a short video about what's happening in the brain. It is a cute little way to show the hand model of the brain.
Ever felt a big reaction to something and not known why? Here's a way to help you understand your brain and manage your behaviour. The hand model of the brain. The bottom of your hand represents the brainstem and is involved with the automatic physical processes that keep us alive, like breathing and our heart rate. Your thumb is your limbic system, and with your brainstem forms part of your emotional brain. This helps you to manage and understand your feelings and stress responses. The outside of your hand and fingers are your cortex, or your thinking brain. When the thinking and emotional brain work together, it's easier to manage your emotions, talk with others, and problem solve. But if you feel surprised, unsafe or scared, your emotional brain takes immediate action. It can act much faster without working with your thinking brain, so you flip your lid. If you're in real danger, acting fast can help keep you safe, and that's really important. And then when the danger has passed, your lid comes back on. Your thinking brain is back in control. But sometimes we flip our lids when we don't need to. How we think and behave isn't helpful. You can practice putting your lid back on by breathing slowly or by spending time with someone you trust. This tells your emotional brain you are safe, and it can work with your thinking brain again. Now your whole brain can help you manage your behaviour and your feelings.
I think that's a cute way not only to understand it as adults, but also to teach children about what's happening in their brain. And a really important thing to remember with what's happening in the brain is that children who experience trauma or toxic stress repeatedly have an overactive emotional brain. Their amygdala is a little bit overreactive, and can cause them to flip their lid in situations where they're really not in danger. They feel like they're in danger, and I think that it's important for adults to remember that they really are having a hard time, and their brains are telling them that they're in danger, that that's something they need to escape, or they need to fight back, or whatever their emotional reaction is to whatever situation is happening to them. And it's helpful for us to remember that that is actually a physical reaction in their brain. They're not just trying to give us a hard time. And teaching them ways to come back from that is super important. And
Thanks, Liz.
Yep.
I'll jump in. We have just 2 minutes left. So this is just a teaser that we will focus on adult regulation next time. Again, this was part 1 and 2, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. I'll just add that not only is that something important to consider for kids who have heightened responses due to their trauma backgrounds, Liz also said that often adults can have heightened responses to the moment or perceive things that way as well. And then also children with just neurodivergencies can often be more reactive in those same scenarios as well. And as the video says, like when your amygdala is reacting and your thinking brain is flipped, it's not fair to ask kids or adults at the time, like, what were you thinking? Why did you do this? Because they don't have access to that part of their logic at that point. So it's really about co-regulation first. I'm going to skip these in service of doing them justice next time. But as Liz said in the intro, a lot of pyramid in general is really about understanding that a lot of the strategies are rooted in changing or adjusting adult behavior. And so we'll start with that next time as we build. Wanted to invite you to, in the chat as we're closing out, just share a reflective prompt of what's one thing that you heard that changed how you viewed a child's behavior, or reminded you of a different way so maybe it wasn't new information, but you hadn't sort of accessed it in a little bit of time that adjusted your thinking on children's behavior. So we'll ask you to do that in just the last moment with us. This is sharing a reminder that in October on the 22nd, and you'll get the invitation for that, we'll be sharing part 2 of this. So today was really about the paradigm shift of reframing behavior. And part 2 is once we have that reframe, how do we apply some strategies? And this is a series that we hope to continue. So part 2 is in October, and then in November, we're going to be talking about family engagement, and really appreciate all of you joining us for this time. This is our email address, peak@uconn.edu. And again, thank you for sharing an hour with us today.
Melissa, I love the hand model of the brain as well. And I've seen it taught to children in a way that they really, really get it. And they use it in their learning of self-regulation skills. It's really cool to see.
Thank you all.